On the same day that the United States and Israel were bombing Iran, that Iranian missiles were striking American embassies, that 6 U.S. soldiers were killed in a makeshift trailer in Kuwait, and that the Senate was preparing to vote on whether this war was even legal. On that same day, the Prime Minister of Canada was in New Delhi, shaking hands with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and announcing a $2.6 billion uranium deal. And the reason that story matters, the reason it deserves serious attention alongside everything else, is that it is not merely a trade story. It is a story about what happens to the architecture of global alliances when the United States becomes, in one Carnegie Endowment scholar's precise formulation, extremely volatile, not particularly predictable, and frankly, if I may be blunt about it, destabilizing many of the institutions and structures around the world. It is a story about 2 countries that nearly severed their relationship entirely less than 3 years ago over an assassination, and about who is now driving them back together. The answer, confirmed by every analyst and diplomat quoted in this story, is Donald Trump. Let's go through all of it carefully, because every word that follows is confirmed from primary sources: CBC News, The Globe and Mail, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, the Canadian Prime Minister's Office official fact sheet, the Cameco Corporation press release, CNBC CP24, BNN Bloomberg, oilprice.com, World Nuclear News, and The Diplomat, all published March 2nd through 5th, 2026. Start with the deal itself because the numbers matter and they need to be stated precisely. On Monday, March the 2nd, Saskatoon-based Cameco Corporation, one of the world's 2 largest uranium producers, signed a long-term uranium supply agreement with India's Department of Atomic Energy at a ceremony in New Delhi, attended by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Cameco CEO Tim Gitzel, and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. The contract calls for Cameco to supply nearly 22 million pounds of uranium ore concentrate to India between 2027 and 2035, a 9-year deal. The total contract value is estimated at approximately $2.6 billion, which at current exchange rates translates to approximately $1.9 billion. The uranium will fuel India's 24 currently operating nuclear reactors, which are the backbone of a nuclear energy expansion program that aims to reach 100 gigawatts of capacity by 2047. Modi said at the joint press statement, "In civil nuclear energy, we have concluded a landmark deal for the long-term supply of uranium." The Canadian Prime Minister's office published a formal fact sheet describing the agreement as part of a broader strategic energy partnership between the 2 countries. Carney said, "This is not merely the renewal of a relationship. It is the expansion of a valued partnership with new ambition, focus, and foresight." The uranium deal was the largest single transaction among 10 commercial deals announced during Carney's 4-day India visit, which the Prime Minister's office valued at a combined $5.5 billion. The other agreements, smaller in scale but significant in scope, included a coal supply deal with British Columbia-based Elk Valley Resources, a $155 million pharmaceutical manufacturing investment in New Brunswick by Mumbai-based Jubilant Pharmanova, and a commitment by HCL Technologies to open new artificial intelligence centers in Calgary and Mississauga and expand an existing facility in Vancouver, growing Indian technology employment in Canada from approximately 3,000 to 5,250 workers. The 2 leaders also signed 5 memorandums of understanding covering energy, critical minerals, technology and AI, talent, culture, and defense. And they launched formal negotiations on a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, a full free trade deal, with a stated target of concluding negotiations by December 2026. Carney's goal, more than doubling 2-way bilateral trade to $70 billion by 2030. That number needs context. Bilateral trade between Canada and India currently stands at roughly $9 billion annually. The ambition is to increase it by nearly 8 times. As the Globe and Mail reported, it is an extraordinary target. Whether it is achievable depends on factors well beyond any single deal or any single visit. For Cameco, this contract is a vindication and a relief. The company operates Canada's 2 most productive uranium mines, Cigar Lake and McArthur River Key Lake, both in northern Saskatchewan, where CBC News reported uranium mining employs more than 2,300 people and roughly 49% of workers at those mines are residents of the North itself. One University of Saskatchewan economist told CBC the deal represents approximately 6 to 7% of Cameco's total annual production, meaning it can be fulfilled with existing mine capacity without requiring expansion. Saskatchewan Premier Moe, speaking at the High Commission in New Delhi, said, This is a big deal because this is a real vote of confidence in Saskatchewan, Canada, and Cameco. Cameco CEO Gitzel added, India is embarking on an ambitious nuclear expansion to power its development plans and meet the future energy security needs of its people. That isn't possible without a stable supply of uranium fuel. Now let's talk about why this deal almost didn't happen and what it took to make it possible. Because the backstory is one of the most dramatic diplomatic reversals in recent Canadian history. To understand it, you need to go back to June 2023. On June 18th, 2023, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen, a Sikh activist, and a supporter of an independent Khalistan state, was shot and killed outside the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia. In September of that year, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood in the House of Commons and said that Canadian security services were pursuing credible allegations that agents of the Indian government were involved in Nijjar's killing. The accusation was extraordinary, an accusation of state-directed assassination on Canadian soil, targeting a Canadian citizen. India dismissed the allegations as absurd. The diplomatic fallout was immediate and severe. India forced Canada to send most of its diplomats home. And in October 2024, after the RCMP accused New Delhi of orchestrating a wider network of violence, extortion, and intimidation targeting Sikh communities across British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, Canada expelled India's High Commissioner and 5 other diplomats. India retaliated in kind. 2 of the G7's largest democracies had, in effect, suspended normal diplomatic relations. That is the relationship that Carney inherited when he became Prime Minister following the Liberal Party leadership race in early 2025. And the decision he made is worth noting precisely. Rather than maintain Trudeau's confrontational posture, Carney chose reset. The turning point came in June 2025 when Carney invited Modi to the G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta. The two held what multiple sources described as a substantive bilateral meeting on the sidelines, agreed to reappoint high commissioners in each other's capitals, and began the institutional repair work that made Monday's uranium deal possible. Carney and Modi met again at the G20 in Johannesburg in November. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, made a security-focused visit to Canada in February 2026, formalizing intelligence sharing protocols and law enforcement coordination frameworks. By the time Carney landed in Mumbai on February 27th, the relationship had moved, in the words of one analyst quoted by CNBC, from diplomatic stabilization to sectoral strategic convergence. But here is what happened in the 48 hours immediately before Carney met Modi, because it is important and it was reported in real time by Al Jazeera. On Sunday, February 28th, the same morning U.S.-Israeli bombs were falling on Tehran, Vancouver police knocked on the door of Moninder Singh, a Sikh activist and associate of Nijjar, to warn him that a threat against his life had been received from a confidential informant. The officer told Singh that the threat extended to his wife and 2 children. Singh recorded the conversation on his home doorbell camera. Then, 2 days before Carney was due to arrive in New Delhi, a senior Canadian government official briefed reporters and said, India is no longer a threat to Canadian security. That phrase generated immediate controversy inside Canada. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, traveling with Carney's delegation, publicly distanced herself from those words, telling reporters, the words of the senior official are not words that I personally would use. And on the very day Carney sat down with Modi at Hyderabad House, the very day the uranium deal was signed, the Globe and Mail published a new report citing 2 anonymous sources who said an Indian consular official in Vancouver had supplied operational information about Nijjar to his killers. The RCMP investigation is ongoing. Anand, when pressed on the report, said it would be irresponsible to speak directly about an active RCMP investigation while it is ongoing. Carney did not hold a news conference with traveling reporters in New Delhi. He canceled the planned availability and sent Anand out instead. He did not publicly address the new Globe and Mail report during his time in India. He signed the uranium deal. He launched the free trade talks. Modi, who has a documented reputation for avoiding unscripted press conferences, credited Carney personally and effusively. Prime Minister Carney has not even completed 1 year in office, yet our relations have leapt forward by a light year, he said. I credit my friend Prime Minister Carney for the growing momentum in every area of cooperation. Carney said there had been more engagement between the Canadian and Indian governments in the last year than there has been in the last 2 decades combined. CNBC, reporting on the diplomatic context, quoted Evan Feigenbaum of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace directly. The United States is extremely volatile, not particularly predictable, and frankly, if I may be blunt about it, destabilizing many of the institutions and structures around the world. Feigenbaum described Carney's trip to India and German Chancellor Merz's visit to Beijing as both being, in no small degree, in reaction to volatility from the United States. There is one more specific detail in this story that underscores how fragile this new foundation is. India's Ministry of External Affairs confirmed during the official press conference on the results of the Carney-Modi meeting that the previous Cameco India uranium supply contract, signed in 2015 under then Prime Minister Stephen Harper, was never fulfilled. Cameco supplied uranium to India under that contract beginning in 2015, confirmed by CBC and World Nuclear News. But the agreement, which ran until 2020, was the last major commercial link between the two countries before the diplomatic rupture. The new 9-year deal, running from 2027 to 2035, is therefore not a continuation of a functioning relationship. It is a reconstruction of one built on a foundation that an active murder investigation has not yet fully settled. Carney left India on Tuesday, heading to Australia and then Japan, continuing an Indo-Pacific trade push through March 7th. He has now visited China, India, Australia and Japan, 4 of the world's major non-American economies, in the first year of his prime ministership. His former role as governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England gives him a credibility in financial and economic settings that most politicians do not possess. The Asia-Pacific Foundation's Veena Najibullah put it plainly. There is definitely sort of a Trump accelerator in play here because both sides are moving quicker than they have in the past when it comes to forging partnerships and making deals. The bombs were still falling on Tehran. 6 Americans were newly dead in Kuwait. The Senate was about to vote on a war no one authorized. And in New Delhi, Canada just sold India 9 years' worth of uranium. Stay with us.